Great. So I'd like to call to order this meeting, regular meeting of the Desert Water Agency's Board of Directors, October 17th, 2023. I'd ask anybody who is participating virtually to please mute your microphones until and unless you're ready to make some public comment. And for those present in the boardroom with us this morning, if you could mute your electronic devices at this time. I will be calling on directors in roll call order for discussion and questions in the following order: Director Gracia, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be conducted via this roll call. And with that, I'd like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda is the roll call. And Assistant Secretary Baca, if you could do that, please.
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director Bloomer,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Here.
and President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Item number 3 would be public comments on items not on today's agenda. So if there are members of the public who would like to comment at this point about matters that are relevant to the water agency but not on today's agenda, now is the time to do that. Assistant Secretary Baca, did we receive any email or phone call comments prior to the meeting?
No comments have been requested.
Thank you. Seeing none from the public, we'll move on to number 4. This would be public comment on items that are listed on today's agenda. And again, if there are members of the public who would like to speak at this time, please raise your hand or come forward to the podium. Seeing none, we'll move to item number 5, the consent calendar items. If there are directors who would like to pull one of the 3 items listed under the consent calendar on the agenda, please let me know now. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to accept the consent calendar items as listed.
So moved.
Thank you. I have a first from Vice President Bowman.
Seconded.
Thank you. From Secretary Treasurer McKenna, a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item number 6 is a discussion item regarding Aqua webinar attendance and manner of authorization. Assistant Manager Johnson. Oh, he's not here.
Good morning.
Sorry. Like, oh.
Assistant General Manager Johnson came down with something, and
Okay.
he's absent.
So you're going to fill in for him?
I'm filling in.
Okay, thank you.
So bear with me. Recently, there was a request by one of the members of the board to participate in an upcoming Aqua webinar. This was presented to the Executive Committee on October 11th with a recommendation to add the Aqua webinar to an established listing of authorized events. The committee also inquired if the agency's policies and ordinances were more restrictive than the government code, which allows with regards to directors' compensation and expense and reimbursement, and also asked if administrative procedure currently in place for authorizing compensable activities is excessive and can be simplified. Government code provides that the board may allow payment of compensation for board members' attendance at conferences and organized educational activities when compensation is otherwise authorized by statute. The Water Code authorizes the board to compensate the board members for each day of service by request of the board. So in order to qualify for compensation, the board must determine whether attendance at a conference or organized educational activity is deemed to be at the request of the board. Ordinance number 16 approved by DWA Board in 1974 and Ordinance 51 approved by the Board in 1990 both provided that for some types of events, out-of-pocket expenses could qualify for reimbursement even though such events were not approved for compensation if attendance at such event was approved by the board in advance. This was the policy approved by those previous DWA boards at the time those ordinances were adopted. The policy was more restrictive than what the statute actually required. And I just want to point out that this morning, Ms. Bach provided me a listing of all of the ordinances that pertain to expenses, reimbursement of expenses by directors. There are 12 ordinances, not just these two. So there's a whole bunch of ordinances, and I think this was just put in here as an example of how compensation has been dealt with in the past, and that it has been more restrictive than statute. The current board may determine as a matter of current policy not to keep these additional limitations imposed by prior boards. The more restrictive policy is not mandated by statute. The statute currently in effect allows the board to determine that attendance at aqua webinars shall be deemed to be at the request of the board, consistent with the water code, and therefore qualifies as service for which compensation may be paid. If the board decides to do so, staff recommends adding aqua webinars to the list of other services rendered as a board director and change the name of the list to other conferences or organized activities pursuant to the government code. This will make attendance compensable and also authorize reimbursement of any associated actual or necessary expenses. This will not require an amendment of the current adopted ordinance. And I would just point out, I think there is some frustration with this is a cumbersome process, but we're going through the first iteration of this, the first year where all these different activities are being presented to us because they're on the calendar and they happen annually. And I think after the first year, it's going to get better because I think we're going to take 90% of the things that the directors want to attend, and they'll be on the list, and it'll be just kind of one-offs that we'll be putting on there. But I think there is a process that we're not quite finished going through yet.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now we can open it up for discussion. We'll start with Director Gracia.
Well, only to say I'm glad it came to the board. I don't really see it as a new, I see it adapting to a new technology, if you will. Typically you'd have to travel to attend one of these things, and now you don't have to. It's brought right to you. So I'm supportive of it, and thank you for bringing it forward. I did want to clarify something because I didn't quite. Some of these that are offered through Aqua are sponsored by Aqua, and others are actual Aqua events. And I'd say it's about half and half. And I know at Mission Springs they allowed it, but they somehow kept Aqua sponsor. I don't remember how they put it, but if it was like I attended one this month that was on Chromium 6 that was put on by a private company. I probably learned as much or more during that, and it was not an Aqua Direct event. It was a sponsored event, an event that was listed on the Aqua website, not necessarily an Aqua event. So that would not have been. It was a free event, so it didn't become an issue of whether or not pay the $50 fee or whatever it is would have been if it was an Aqua event. So I'd just like to stipulate in there that it would cover anything that Aqua offers, as opposed to Aqua sponsored. If you don't find objection to that, then it would just be whatever is on their website. I was going to cover that event in later in the agenda. So it became very interesting. So
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
I'm in support of adding it to the list.
Okay.
Webinars.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I am too, because I'm finding Aqua almost the most useful organization that we belong to. Very informative for a newbie like me. So yeah, I'm in favor of adding them as well.
Vice President Bowman?
I'd like to discuss the idea of whether it's Aqua sponsored or Aqua endorsed, some of the differences you were talking about.
yeah, I don't know how they differentiate it, but basically an Aqua person would lead the, the webinar as opposed to Aqua just offering because like that one I just spoke about on the Chromium 6, that was not an Aqua event, that was an Aqua sponsored event that was made available through Aqua.
So they felt it was worthy enough to push to their
Right,
the
right.
organization.
Now, at Mission Springs, as I understand it, it would not have been, because it was not a direct Aqua event, they wouldn't have permitted it. So I just don't want that to become a thing down the road when people are trying to make reservations and they don't know and they go to the trouble of being, and then it's not. They find out that,
So the idea is that if it's on the Aqua website,
right,
that we would say thumbs up.
I would think so. That just makes it easier, and then it doesn't put them in a position of having to say, well, no, that one doesn't qualify. You can't go that one. Which I attended another one that equity and diversion. What is it?
Diversity?
Yeah, there you go. And I found that interesting enough to attend. I think it was free, but it wouldn't be something that I would have put in for compensation. I don't think, because when it was over, I was like, it's just more of that. And I'm all for diversity and equity and employment, but the things you learn in these things, you leave with a perspective of, what's really going on here. Are they really trying to improve diversity in the workplace, or are they just trying to pretend like they're trying to?
Okay, so I think that if it's on the Aqua website, if they
Yeah.
are saying this is worthy for our members to see or to attend, I would be supportive of
Yeah.
something like that.
I would agree. So at this point, I think what we discussed in the executive committee last week when this item came up was we would start it as a discussion item, and then if at the board's pleasure, we could make it a action item. Is that correct? Is that we're allowed to do that? Take it from discussion to action?
Yes, if it's on the agenda, then you can take action on it, regardless of whether it's characterized as discussion or an action.
All right. So then I will be looking for a motion from the board to,
Move staff's recommendation, I believe that's what it was recommended, and that it include anything on the website, anything promoted by Aqua.
okay, I'll have a first from Director Gracia. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Great. Thank you. Director Bloomer. Assistant Secretary Baca.
Can I just clarify that on the motion? So we're adding
Well, I don't
list
know.
other, there is, because there's no staff recommendation on here, it's a discussion item, so it's asking, are we going to change the name of the list to other conferences or organized activities pursuant? Is that what we're doing? Is that the motion?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 7, the Secretary Treasurer's Report for August 2023.
Highlights are, operating fund, we received $3.8 million in water sales revenue, $140,000 in recycled water sales revenue, receipts, and $14,779 in power sales revenue from Southern California Edison for the Snow Creek Hydro. Paid out $2.9 million in accounts payable. Our year-to-date water sales are 4% under budget. Revenue is 2% under budget, and expenses are 8% under budget. There were 23,500 active accounts, and that's an increase of 21. The general fund received $882,000 in property taxes, $344,000 in replenishment assessments from private pumpers, and $201,000 from Coachella Valley Water District for the State Water Project Cost Share Agreement. And we paid out $1.279 million in state water project charges, making a year-to-date of $4.7 million. On the wastewater fund, we received $62,000 in revenue receipts and paid out $82,000 on payables.
Thank you. Item number 9, Director's Reports on Meetings and Events attended on behalf of the agency. I ask that you state the name of the conference and the date attended as you make your reports, and we'll start with Director Gracia.
I'm sorry, President Ortega, you skipped item number 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. I was looking for our Assistant General Manager. All right, we'll go back to item 8, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The General Manager's report. First item is DWA Waterfall Feature Reboot. The waterfall feature in our visitors parking lot of the Operations Center is being cleaned, reconditioned, and prepared to be placed back into service. A multi-department effort is being put forward to accomplish this project. Employees from Down to Earth Landscaping have cleaned the upper supply basin of the fountain and the surrounding landscape area. Our construction department is cleaning out the return basin and has placed additional rocks on some of the landings to deter vagrant trespassing in the stream area. The operations department is rebuilding the float switch and ensuring all electrical components are in proper service. Our facility and safety department is ordering new recycled water signage to be displayed prominently for the public to see. And finally, our outreach and conservation department will be putting together a brief social media presentation to inform followers of the project of its benefits to the micro ecosystem near the waterfall area, which I believe is our butterfly garden area. And the project will be completed, and the project shall be complete and the fountain functional by the end of October. Next item is damage to agency water main. On October 10th, the contractor performing work within the intersection of Indian Canyon Drive and San Rafael struck and damaged an agency 12-inch AC water main, causing a large leak resulting in a large sinkhole. The agency's crews responded immediately and were able to isolate the pipe, stop the leak, and repair the damaged section of main line. Once the pipeline was repaired, Southern California Gas Company crews moved into the hole to repair the exterior coating on a high-pressure gas main that was located next to the water main. As I understand it, if our water main hadn't been there, they would have run directly into the gas main, so I guess that could have been a much worse situation. Once all the repair work was complete, the contractor who was performing the work within the intersection backfilled the hole, removed the damaged asphalt, and placed temporary asphalt over the area. The agency will be pursuing reimbursement from the contractor for damages. The total cost has not yet been determined. The water loss estimated due to the leak is approximately 240,000 gallons. Next item is making conservation a California way of life draft regulation. The State Water Board initiated formal rulemaking for making conservation a California way of life on August 18th, 2023. Board President Paul Ortega and Ashley Metzger of Regional Government Services attended the public hearing on October 4th in Sacramento and provided testimony. DWA will also submit a formal comment letter on October 17th, and I think a copy of that letter is on your dais for your review and comment. Staff recently met with the State Water Resources Control Board staff to express concerns related to the objective being significantly lower than the current use. The State Water Resources Control Board staff did not immediately identify any solutions, but acknowledged staff's expressed concerns related to DWA's evapotranspiration data, seasonal population, relatively low number of dedicated irrigation meters within our system, underlying county parcel data, which is in some cases erroneous, aerial measurement tools, accuracy in measuring desert landscape area, and rights-of-way irrigated by residential water meters. In addition, DWA signed onto Aqua's coalition letter and coordinated with regional partners, including cities and trade groups, to submit their own comment letters. These efforts align with DWA's legislative and regulatory policy platform, Directive 6. Next item is DWR to conduct airborne electromagnetic surveys in the Coachella Valley. The California Department of Water Resources is conducting airborne electromagnetic AEM surveys funded in part through Proposition 68 throughout California's high and medium priority groundwater subbasins. DWR has tentatively scheduled an AEM survey in the Coachella Valley area between November 13th and the 17th. During the AEM surveys, a helicopter towed equipment measures electromagnetic properties of subsurface materials to a depth of approximately 1,000 feet below ground surface. Data collected during the surveys will provide valuable information about groundwater aquifer structures, which will help improve our understanding of groundwater resources and support local management effort goals to implement SIGMA. In coordination with this effort, local water agencies will be conducting limited groundwater elevation measurements to help provide a basis for comparison with the AEM data. DWR plans to email postcards out on October 18th to parcel owners within a buffer zone beneath the flight path. DWR will also issue a press release 1 week prior to the scheduled survey. DWA staff plans to talk about the surveys on KESQ later this month. I just want to point out that this is kind of exciting. A lot of what we do in SIGMA is estimate flow from one subbasin to another, and that's because these subbasins are separated by faults. And since the faults are below ground, we don't really know factually what their actual depth is and what they actually look like. And so it's just a big estimate, and this survey is going to shed light on what that looks like. If there's a fault that runs 100 feet underground but then has a big dip in it that goes down 300 feet, a notch, then we're going to know that that is where most of the water is coming through. It's going to give us an idea of what that flow actually is. So for the first time, we're going to kind of look under the hood, so to speak. And this is going to be very noticeable by all of our customers. I mean, this helicopter's going to be flying around with gear underneath it that's 200 or 300 feet, wide. It's like a big antenna array. So that's going to be very interesting. You're probably going to be fielding a lot of questions about that. And they can't fly over populated areas, though. So, I mean, that's why these buffer zones, they come up close to where people are living, but they can't directly fly over. But I just want to point that out. The next item is DWA hosted facility tour for ESRI conference attendees. On October 9th, DWA hosted a group from ESRI conference for a tour of DWA facilities. The tour included an introduction to DWA and how the agency uses and plans to use geographic informational systems, or GIS technology, to improve operating efficiency. The group of 14 guests toured the solar field, the water reclamation plant, and its laboratory. The ESRI guests were given an opportunity to watch our lab director, Paul Monroy, in action as he demonstrated how water is tested to ensure it meets the highest quality. And they were able to ask questions and get some answers to those questions on water quality. DWA's operations supervisor, Emmanuel Sarpong, also assisted, along with Assistant General Manager Steve Johnson, provided a tour of the water reclamation plant. The ESRI guests learned how the wastewater received from the city's wastewater treatment plant reaches DWA plant to be treated and reused throughout our service area. After touring the plant, the group headed back to the Operations Center where the agency's GIS specialist, Heather Marks, provided a presentation on how the agency is developing its GIS department to include an example of how the agency staff have converted the pipeline leak report from a 2 to 3 hour task to a 15-minute task using GIS. DWA will be hosting a public tour of the Snow Creek, Whitewater, Mission Creek sites on Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. The group will, the tour will run approximately 4 hours, offering a morning and afternoon tour. And I'll just mention that the ESRI group was very impressed with how fast our GIS department is progressing. And we just got a lot of nice compliments from them. So I was pleased to hear that.
I believe we might have a question.
What is the SRA?
Oh, boy. Yeah, but it actually it's an acronym that stands for something, and I don't know.
Engineering,
that is.
science, I don't know. I wondered the same thing. I kept reading it, looking, well, they must have.
They're the world's, foremost prominent company providing, the geographic informational system, and they're located in Redlands, and I wish I knew what their acronym meant.
Oh, is that the company name?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
They have their largest conference here
Oh, I
in Palm
see.
Springs every year.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Okay.
continue. Thank you.
All right. The next is the system leak report. We had 30 leaks in a 2-week period. You can see that 3 of these leaks, Ramon Road, Andreas Road, and Via Altamira, are on the replacement project plan for 2021, 2022. There isn't really anything too unusual about this report to point out. Next is an update of the human resources meetings and activities. We had a Valley-wide employment expo that we attended. We conducted interviews. We had our Lincoln advisor on site for meetings with employees. Attended a CSUSB Palm Desert Career Fair, DWA safety meetings, Lincoln Alliance platform review, and new employee orientation, and attended a PIRA meeting virtually. And last item, the general manager's meetings and activities. Assistant General Manager Johnson attended a meeting with Miralon developer, had his weekly meeting with the Snow Creek Security, SCE Fleet Electrification Workshop, Mission Springs Water District Strategic Planning Workshop, weekly staff meetings, ESRI conference tour, executive committee meeting, biweekly meeting with our IT department, conservation report updates with RGS, sites reservoir joint budget and finance committee meeting, conservation and public affairs committee meeting, which I also attended, and the State Water Contractors Class 8 quarterly meeting, which I also attended with Steve. And lastly, our Metropolitan Water District, Coachella Valley Water District, and DWA Water Delivery Coordination meeting, which we had yesterday. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the report?
No questions.
Okay.
I have one question on the sinkhole. Was that the same contractor that caused the other
Yes.
one? Okay.
Yeah. He's batting 1,000.
Yeah, I was
What
about-
are they doing? They're
I think they're underground. I mean, they're doing directional drilling,
Drilling.
which is pretty common. I don't know what utility it is that they're putting in, but they're not being very careful.
careful. Okay. Thanks.
anything else? Yes?
I have an answer rather than a question. ESRI is Environmental Systems Research Institute.
Thank you. I'll try to remember that.
Anything else? No? All right. Now we can move to item number 9, Director's Reports, and we'll start with Director Grasha.
So going back to the 3rd, I guess, October 3rd, on the 10th of October, I attended the Coachella Valley Water District Board meeting, and the thing that stood out about that meeting was they had it, instead of at 8 o'clock in the morning, they had it at 6, and instead of in Coachella, they had it in Palm Desert. And I never figured out why they had that. Anyway, there was nothing remarkable about the agenda, and it was very short as well. It was almost like, why did they bother? But anyway, and then on the 11th of October, I attended that Chromium 6 compliance review, and I'm leery to try to, I've attended probably more of these meetings on this subject than probably anybody, because I've been going to them since this became an issue, and when I had my home over in CVWD. I don't know why I developed an interest in it, but anyway, the same thing I leave every one of these meetings, just as this one was. These were two scientists that spoke on this subject, way over my head and probably over the heads of anybody. It was more detailed than on the way, basically promoting their business, but the end result of that was just like every other one of these, and I don't want to characterize every meeting that I've attended lately on the subject of stannous chloride, but they all end up in the same, well, it needs more study or needs more research. Nobody will go on the record and say, well, we tried and it didn't work. I keep thinking, I don't want to put words in the mouth of President Powell over at CVWD, but he gave a report probably a couple of years ago now that sounded to me like they put an end to their research when somebody stole the research equipment off of one of their well sites, which was incidentally the well site that served the house that I lived in, and that started me down this path to try to figure out what they were doing. Anyway, and he ended that meeting something with the same similar tone was, well, needs more research, but they stole our equipment, and that's probably the end of that. That's how that meeting ended. And I don't know that they picked it up from there and continued their research. I know that the city of Coachella had picked up a grant to do some research. I don't know if that grant money was to build a new trailer to replace the one that got stolen or what. I can't keep up with it. But these guys were two scientists that said basically that it needs more research. And agencies that are affected by this subject, and we're not one of them, have to come to a conclusion as to whether or not they're going to use this unproven technology to try to, the difference in price, as we've learned here, doing that is, for an agency, it's detrimental to the future of most agencies in California that are actually affected by this. So I don't know, when they come out with that standard, I don't know how in 2 years they're going to work through finding a safe way to reduce it without removing it. And so anyway, that's my my thoughts on that. And so on, oh boy. On the 12th of October, neither one of these were compensatable, but I attended at one of the webinars, creating tomorrow's workforce through diversity and inclusion. And I'll leave that for just to let you know I attended it. Then yesterday we had our Conservation and Public Affairs Committee meeting, and I thought that was rather interesting. At some point, we probably want to review how we had an appeal for problem that occurred, misunderstanding, I guess is the way to put it, between our staff and one of our ratepayers. And it was, they appealed the staff's decision to compensate for, on the rebates for a certain amount of square footage. And it seemed like, and I don't have a problem with the way we handled it, but it seems like that, and the only reason I suggest that maybe we take a look at bringing it to a full board is because of the security arrangements that felt like were lacking at a committee meeting as opposed to what you have when everybody's in the room. We ruled against the guy, and I don't know how much money was involved, but it was considerable. It wasn't a $500 water bill or anything. It was maybe 10 grand, I just guess. And so seemed like that would be something you want to do when you have more hands on deck. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I did not attend anything since our last board meeting, so
Okay.
that's it.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Since the last meeting, I tuned into Mission Springs Water District, 2 meetings on the 5th of October, one of them regarding their solar installations. I think that may have died since then, but they punted it again. There was a pretty big price tag on the solar system that they were planning to do, and I think they just balked it, so spending that much money in present circumstances. On the 11th, 12th, and 13th of October, I went to Aqua meeting in the vicinity of Coalinga. It was very interesting. I'll comment later on what I observed as we toured some replenishment facilities for groundwater in that area. We saw some of the farms that were in operation, some good, some not so good. I will have a comment later on that, but it's a more political comment, so I won't make it now. Yesterday, I attended Mission Springs Water District in person. Great meeting. They have a very functional board these days. And it's nice to see.
Yes.
Let me just look at what their agenda was. Yeah, they had a good discussion on their per diem, which is $100 a day. And I think their consensus was that they will probably increase it to $250. And there was some comment privately about our per diem being one of the highest in the area. But I think Director Amber Duff made an excellent point, one that I made here. That's why it's excellent. That the per diem, being as low as it is, discourages ordinary working people from getting involved. Oh my goodness, the per diem discourages low per diems discourage ordinary working people from getting involved in agencies like this, and that's the kind of person you should have on these boards, people that represent our ratepayers. So kudos to them, I think, for taking that courageous political step of more than doubling their per diem. That's it for me.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, we had our executive committee on the 11th. On the 12th, I pretended I was Gerald McKenna at the MSWD meeting, and I jokingly, I said, I just want to be as handsome as he. And anyway, as talked about, as you mentioned, they were dealing with a solar project that was $28 million, and they indeed said, not now. And then there was also discussion, preliminary discussion on board compensation. And I think that I agree with you, Director McKenna, that it is time for them to bring things along. And I hope they not only do that, but tie it into some cost of living so that it will not be stagnant. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. So I attended as the general manager has mentioned, the State Water Board review of their draft for the with the letter that we're about, that you all have a copy of, the draft letter. I attended that on the 4th of October in Sacramento. It was a very long day. It started with what they kept referring to as workshops or panels. And that took a good part of the meeting. probably 4 or 5 hours was spent on that, and those were, I would like to say, those were hand-selected water agencies that were asked to present uh, on certain aspects of the draft regulations. It was my opinion, as well as Mrs. Metzger's opinion, that perhaps those handpicked water agency presenters did not, in fact, really bolster the program that the State Water Board was, I think, hoping to get across, because even though many of them appear to be able to meet the standards that are being reviewed, they in fact realized that, or many of those agencies commented that they were going to have challenges in doing so. And so that in the afternoon, after lunch, became public comment. There were probably over 100 attendees, both virtually and in person, who chose to do that, including our friends at Mission Springs Water Districts and Coachella Valley Water District. But I think the message was loud and clear that the what's being proposed in the draft is going to be very, very challenging for most, if not all, water agencies to meet. And another point that came out quite clearly was that the onus of the burden in many cases will fall on those ratepayers who probably can least afford it. So we'll see how that develops, but I do encourage all of you to review the draft letter that you have a copy of here on the dais. And then for last Thursday and Friday, last week, I too attended the Aqua Region 6 and 7 event. The first day was a tour of various replenishment programs that are being developed or in process of being developed or have been in place for a while. I found it quite fascinating. Most of them, well, it's a very agricultural area, so they're very focused on ag up there, and many of these programs are taking place either on public lands or private lands in cooperation with farmers and farms. And then the next day was a conference, a mini conference, I guess you could say, presentations by various flood control districts and irrigation districts located in Kern and Fresno and Kings County. The big thing that one of the presenters toward the very beginning made a comment. She works for a flood control district in Kings County, and her comment was that flood control is groundwater management. That we shouldn't separate the two. That we should look at when we have so much water like we've had this year. We should look at that as a way to put them into places where we can actually affect the aquifers there. So I thought that was if not obvious, but it's definitely insightful way of starting to look at what to do. There are many challenges that I also didn't realize that a lot of that area of southern San Joaquin Valley has a lot of clay in it, which makes it challenging to put water into the aquifers there because of the clay layers, which I think they refer to as Corcoran clay or something like, yeah. But anyway, that was a very informative day. And I know this is something that's coming up, so it's not something that I've attended yet, but I do want to remind our members of the board and members of the public that Saturday at UCR Palm Desert is Coachella Valley Garden Day. It is something that this agency has been part of since, I think, 2006, when I helped to start that garden day at the Living Desert, and now it's migrated, or it's grown into a very large event that encompasses all the water agencies of the Coachella Valley and lots of other organizations that are interested in gardening. And it will be going on from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Coachella Valley CV Water Council will have a booth there, and I will be part of a panel in the afternoon. But it's a fun event. You get lots of free plants. So stop by UCR Palm Desert if you have the opportunity. It's going to be a great day. And with that, I'll conclude item number 9, and we'll move on to item 10, which is director's comments or requests. Director Gracia?
Just to comment on your comments at the Director Bauman at the MSWD meeting, I thought you were 100% right on, and I was like, yeah, I'm glad somebody stood up and said, and they ultimately, I don't know if they had their meeting yesterday or not, but I hope they're, they're finally showing some courage to do some important things over there. One was to say, hold off on the solar plant. It's just too much money to bite off right now for that agency. And the other was to finally say, we can't do this anymore for $100. It's just not possible. And it sounded like they might trim it down from what the staff recommendation was, I think 300 and something. Their math was a little bit off. There was a time in the 60s when their stipend was $100 a day. And then somebody made a campaign issue out of it in the 60s and said, if I get elected, I'm going to cut them in half. So they cut it to 50. And so if they use the original 100 that the state allowed back then instead of 50, their stipend today would be close to $800 a meeting. So I don't think 300. I think the number was like a little over $300 a meeting if they went with the year 2000 figure that they had. So I hope if their meeting was yesterday and they voted on it, well, I hope they're happy. But I think they should have gone for the full 300 and something. And the reason is stability on the board, and it encourages people to get out there and fight for these seats. In Desert Hot Springs, nobody wants to do the water board thing. They want to be on the city council. It's the most important agency in the city. The city councils and so forth, they come and go. I mean, if you've been here for 15 years, you've seen a turnover 3 times in the Palm Springs Council, pretty much. But the water boards seem to stick around forever. And and that's because people don't want to run, because it takes a lot of energy. So anyway, thank you for your comments there, and you were right on both of those subjects. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
I don't have anything. Thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Yeah. The first thing I want to comment is we had a letter from a ratepayer about artificial turf and how we include our artificial turf in our rebate program. And she makes a good point about the environmental impact of that artificial turf. I mean, I think it comes complete with PFAS and PFAS. I wonder if we have somebody look at that as well, and we should be subsidizing artificial turf as a turf replacement when it has problems of its own. We may be setting up a future issue. So I think I would encourage staff to look into that, whether that's a good thing. Second thing is this whole question of water use in California. I've commented publicly before on the alfalfa foolery, where we use 3.4 million acre-feet of water a year compared to our Colorado River allocation of 4.4 million. 3.4 million acre-feet a year of water is used growing alfalfa, which is used for feeding cattle. The biggest operator that I saw in California and Calipatria is a company called Fondamonte, and they are a subsidiary of Almera, which is a company wholly owned by the Saudi Arabian royal family. And you might ask, what have they done for us lately, apart from raising the price of oil by cutting production? Nevertheless, this alfalfa is grown and exported, and our water is exported with it. So when we're faced with the State Water Board asking us to cut usage by 34%, you might well ask, how about the water being used to grow alfalfa for export? Let's cut that 34%, or let's make them pay more than $20 an acre foot. The water that comes through my meter at my house costs nearly $1,000 an acre foot, and it's just completely disproportionate. And then going to the San Joaquin Valley and seeing what's going on up there, it's different, but it's the same. The farmers have all gone nuts. No, let me rephrase that. the farmers have gone all nuts. The row crops you used to see, the carrots, the vegetables that we eat, seem to have completely disappeared. I used to drive that route once in a while in the late 1990s, and I enjoyed seeing all the agricultural produce that was being made and stuff that I was eating. But now I see almonds, pistachios, and walnuts, and it takes exactly a gallon of water to produce a single almond. And these trees have been installed, planted all in the last 10 to 20 years. And by my reckoning, of the last 24 years in California, 18 of them have been dry, abnormally dry, drought, or extreme drought. So the farmers are planting crops that need water every single year without fail. And they're expecting us, if you like, to provide it for them. You know, the state as a whole is being asked, keep the aqueduct running, build a bypass onto the delta, build another reservoir, continue to feed this monster that we have created, the agricultural monster. I want to put it in context. We live in a state with a $3.6 trillion economy. It's approaching Germany's level, which is 4.2. And there are twice as many Germans as there are us. Of that 3.6 trillion, about 50 billion comes from agriculture, multiplied by adding packing, transportation. It's 2.5% of the state's economy. And it's using 60 to 80% of the state's water. And we can't go on like this. This is unsustainable. In addition to that, these farmers have pumped so much groundwater out of the valley that the state water project aquifer is sinking in places by 20 or 30 feet. It will need to be repaired. It's 50 years old anyway. It's reaching the end of its useful life. A massive expenditure will be required, and our ratepayers are probably going to be asked to fund it. But it's not really our benefit. It's the benefit of this 2.5% of the economy. It's just unbelievably misguided to take the scarce water we have, and in fact, it's water that we don't have. It's 600 miles away from here, and give it to the farmers and let them grow crops that could equally well be grown somewhere where it rains more and they don't need irrigation. So I'm very unhappy to see this. I think it's something that will become an issue. When I see what the State Water Project is asking us to do, you know, we should respond by saying, well, why don't you cut everybody's allocation of water by 34%? Let's see how the nut farmers will cope with that. So there's an issue for the future there that we'll have to address. It will be expensive, it will be difficult, but it must be done. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice President Bowman.
I want to echo your comments, Director McKenna, and I appreciate your 50,000-foot view of the whole picture, not just currently, but in the, what's going to happen down the road. I too have seen the changes in the middle of the valley, and I don't know how we can put this, if we can add something like that to your letter. I don't know if that makes sense. But we have to think ahead. What are we not doing today that will impact the future? And then what are we doing today that will impact the future? These are the hard conundrums of management of life. Pardon me. Secondly, Director McKenna, you have a wonderful report that you read for the Secretary-Treasurer report, and we don't see that on the screen. We see the details. It would be nice if we could see the very thing that you are sharing with all of us. And so, because I'm trying to follow you on the screen, but it's not you. it's the
cheat sheet I have, but I'm sure the staff.
Yeah, I like that cheat sheet because it summarizes it. Anyway, that is all. Thank
you. I have nothing else at this point, so we can move into closed session. I see that it's 6 minutes of 9. If we could meet at 5 after 9 in the conference room. And with that, welcome back to open session. Item 12, we reconvene open session. We don't have anything to report. No reportable actions were taken. And thank you to staff for this meeting today, and we will adjourn until next time. Thank you.